Hi, everyone, and welcome to this Global Legal Tech Hub virtual roundtable exploring open innovation, industry standards, and interoperability. It's great to see so many people joining us from different corners of the world. My name's Robert Clay, and I'll be moderating. And welcome to this session. I'm one of the senior researchers in the Clifford Chance Research and Development Hub, a role that accommodates my geek-like interest in all things future-related and tech-related, including my current obsession with generative artificial intelligence. And I'm joined by a fantastic trio of speakers, Justin Ergler, Jim Hannigan, and Damien Riehl, whose collective and, let's be frank, individual knowledge greatly exceeds my own in this area of open innovation in legal. Before we get too much into the detail of the session itself, though, I'll let everyone quickly introduce themselves. And Justin, perhaps I could hand over to you to quickly kick that off for us.
Yeah, sure. I am Justin Ergler. I am at GSK, GlaxoSmithKline, and I'm a director in legal operations. So I'm on the client side, and I deal with our firms, our outside counsel law firms, as far as figuring out and negotiating flat fee arrangements. We don't use hourly rates, and trying to identify what is fair. Basically, fair price, fair value for matters and similar matter types, and even down to similar task types within matters. So that's why I first got involved with Sally, roughly almost a decade ago. So thank you.
Jim, over to you.
Yeah, hi, Jim Hannigan, Director of Legal Project Management, Coblentz, Duffy & Bass law firm in San Francisco. I've been in the legal innovation space about 13 years at other firms doing the same kind of thing, where trying to make the business of law more professional in the law firm, as in terms of making it more modern. I got involved with Sally around the same time as Justin, and just born out of the frustration of the lack of standard data to get our lawyers to be more responsive to budgets and scope within matter as they manage matters. So it's been a long ride, but we're making a lot of progress with Sally, and very proud to be here. Thank you.
Cool. And I can start. I'm Damien Riehl. I've been a lawyer since 2002, where I litigated with a large law firm, Robbins Kaplan, for about 10 years, representing victims of Bernie Madoff, representing Best Buy and a bunch of their commercial litigation, suing JP Morgan over the mortgage-backed security crisis. Also been a coder since 1985, so I have the law plus tech background. Worked for TR for a couple of years, building a big thing. Did cybersecurity for a few years, where my biggest thing was Facebook hired me and my company to investigate Cambridge Analytica. So I spent Monday through Friday for about 57 weeks in a row on Facebook's campus with Facebook's data scientists and my former FBI, CIA, NSA people, figuring out how bad guys use Facebook data. And my current gig is with VLEX and Fastcase, where we have a data set of about 1 billion legal documents with a B. That is lawyer file documents and judge file documents that we're extracting the DNA from those things. And the way that we're doing that is through Sally. So I have two hats. One is with Fastcase VLEX. One is with Sally, where I work with Jim to be able to extract, figure out what to extract. That is, what are the things that matter, and how can we make those things interoperable between all of the stakeholders, that is, between law firms and their clients and legal vendors.
Awesome, thanks everyone. For those of you joining us, if you've got a question as we get started, or thought that you want to share, then please feel free to share those via the comment section on the LinkedIn events page, and we'll try and pick those up towards the end. But I suppose first, before we get into the substantive discussion, I'm sure there's a few of you wondering what do we mean by open innovation, and where that comes in, and why should folks who are practicing or really care about it. So broadly speaking, open innovation is a concept that refers to the process of collaborating and sharing ideas, knowledge and resources and technologies between organizations, researchers, and individuals to foster innovation and create new products, services, and solutions. It's already been demonstrated as transformative across various sectors, from software and technology and healthcare to finance and manufacturing, really by breaking down those barriers that once confined innovations to different organizations. And we've seen remarkable advancements and breakthroughs that emerge from the power of that collaboration. Many of us are no doubt familiar with open source software as a concept, whereby software is released and under a license in which copyright holders grant users the right to use, study, change, and distribute the software and its source code. Some of us may be familiar with open banking. It's something here in the UK where banks share data with each other to improve customer experience and services. For example, enabling bank customers to see all their financial details in one place. In the context of the legal sector, open innovation aims to enhance legal service delivery through ultimately sharing data amongst law firms, legal technology companies, and other industry stakeholders to encourage, again, that greater collaboration and help push innovation amongst their stakeholders. So I guess to achieve this end goal, the legal industry is going to have to follow a well-trodden path of implementing some kind of industry standard, which is where Sally comes in. And in order to facilitate data mobility and interoperability between these different nodes, if you like. So at this point, I'd love to hear from some of the panel. Jim, perhaps I could start with you because it all sounds really simple on paper. You have my data, I have your data, and we ride off into the sunset and create some lovely innovations. But the reality, I'm sure, is full of challenges, and perhaps you could share some thoughts on those just to kick us off.
Sure. So when we started Sally 7 years ago, every organization defined their matters and their data differently, even though it was very simple concepts, right? So the Sally really formed because we knew we could just give those better labels to things that we could share our data and be more productive. So Damien, you want to take it from there?
Yeah, absolutely. And when we think of innovation, of course, there are thousands or tens of thousands of law firms, and then there are even more corporations and other entities that they serve. So if you think about each of them is within closed source, thinking about, okay, I'm going to figure out what matters to me and my clients, and then trying to innovate individually amongst those tens of thousands of entities. And what Sally is really kind of shedding the light on is all of those 10,000 entities are largely counting the same things. That is, they're largely, as people start integrating with Sally, they're like, oh, wait, Sally already has all the stuff that I thought was my closed source proprietary secret sauce, when the reality is there is no secret sauce. There is an area of law called patent law. Nobody thinks of that. There's an area of law called, antitrust law. So all of Sally's now 12,000 things is something that everyone individually has been thinking about and thought that this is a high value within my organization. But the realization, once they start looking at Sally, is realizing, oh, we can actually benefit from joining this open standard, this open innovation, to be able to get past the thinking that there's secret sauce in any counting of any of these things, but instead there's value in interoperability between the client side and the law firm side and the vendor side, so that now if I join this open innovation standard, I can do things much faster, better, stronger. So I, as a law firm, don't have to map to all of my 12 vendors. I just map to Sally. And then I could be able to do this with all of my vendors. And all of my clients, I don't have to map to all of them. I can just map to Sally, and all of my clients will be on this. So really this closed, this is valuable because it's keeping to me, versus the open, everyone's counting the same things. Let's just go ahead and interoperate.
And also we at the time Sally was begun, we were still in many years of working with software products that claimed to have a lot of analytics capabilities and a lot of advanced functionality for the better decision making, better data, to drive your business. But they didn't really, it didn't fulfill its potential because of the data problem. So that was, it wasn't just the fact, hey, let's share data, but we're going to get better business products that we can use to run our business or firm or in-house department or whatever.
Yeah. I suppose ultimately the people who are going to benefit most from this sort of interoperability are going to be the clients, right? So if we take open bank as an analogy, prudent savers deposit their hard-earned cash with a variety of banks to secure the best savings rates. And open banking has enabled them to get better visibility across all those deposits, if you like. And I guess similarly, law firm clients will approach different law firms depending on the nature of the work. It's good practice to get the right law firm with the best reputation in a particular area of law to work on a particular deal. But I guess that sort of starts to fragment the legal data across those different law firms. And Justin, I suppose looking at this from the client side, to what extent do you think clients have a role to play in driving open innovation and adoption of things like Sally?
Yeah, I think as far as GSK, we made the jump to flat fees about, 9-10 years ago. And one of the hardest things in jumping from as far as a law firm, if they're pitching for a matter, it used to be, okay, here's going to be our hours, here's going to be our rates and all that stuff. And it's kind of nebulous as far as the work that was going to actually be done. How many interviews, how many depositions, so on and so forth. So trying to understand that, you'd have to describe a matter to a firm. Okay, it's this kind of matter. It has this kind of nuance and this jurisdiction and so on and so forth. And it's oftentimes very difficult, not only on the law firm, but for us to look back and say, where have we seen this before, right? How did that look? And so, because data, I mean, even to this day, there's a lot of data in my head because I've been doing this for a minute, but if you ask somebody else to kind of duplicate that, it would be very, very difficult, if not impossible. So with the Sally standard, a client can go to a law firm. And again, I'm just speaking from my perspective, my vantage point, and say, look, here's the Sally code that aligns with this matter. Now, is there going to be some nuance? Yeah, but here's the Sally code. A law firm could go in, search via the Sally code and say, okay, where have we done this in the last 3 years that is related, is similar to this, right? And then that law firm could say, okay, how was it staffed? Who was it? What did it look like for us from a profitability? What was, looking at the nuance, maybe we narrow 7 matters down, or transactions down to 3. These look the most similar. So now I can give GSK confidently because I know how we were on, profitability and things like that. Because as far as a client, hopefully a lot of clients, I've heard different from some of my law firm friends, they want their law firms to be profitable. You don't want unhappy lawyers doing big things for you. That's not where you want to be, and that's not where we want to be. So then you can have an honest and frank discussion about, well, hey, here's our experience. Here's what it was. Here was the outcome. Here's how we did. And, here's the fees that we're proposing, and here's why. And even further for a clients don't like what, as far as billing, finance, surprises, right? You can look at those 3 matters and say, you know what, this one kind of went a 90-degree turn at this juncture. So you can even give the client visibility and say, we feel confident and comfortable with this fee, but just as a heads up, once we get here, there's a possibility it might take a right or a left turn. So as far as clients always say about no surprises, predictability, cost certainty, nothing is ever certain in the legal world, right? Unless Damien is arguing, nothing's ever certain in the legal world. But you can do all those things for the client. More informed pitches, more informed fees, more informed expectations. But also, and I'll let my friends on the law firm side, as far as more informed expectations internally, as far as profitability, are we staffing this correctly, and so on and so forth. So from a client side, and especially with the way we do fees at GSK, those are the major benefits of a single open standard that aligns law firms, clients, third parties, etc. Just speaking the same language.
And Rob, that was the initial. I'm sorry, Damien, I'll let you. Just one quick point. That was initial impetus for Sally, Rob, was what Justin just described. That was it. Frustration over the data. We're trying to pitch, sell our services, agree on what we're talking about in terms of the work and what the fees are. Just getting aligned on that, and Sally has since ballooned into many other use cases, which Damien will go into in great detail, which are more in the innovation side. But the basic, the galvanizing force for us was just, let's get data that we can trust and use and not spend weeks and weeks putting together for every pitch. Go ahead.
Hey, Damien, before you get, let me jump in too. The thing I always like to say is that having this standard across, the different players in this ecosystem of a single matter or whatever, it allows you to elevate the conversation from day one, rather than spending days and whatever saying, okay, here's the matter. Well, does it have this? Well, what is this? What is that? Then you finally get to the real talk, right? The real important stuff. If you've got that Sally standard, you're automatically elevating the conversation from day one. And that's something that I think is a big differentiator and why I think Sally is so important for the industry. I'm sorry, Damien, go ahead.
No, that was a great segue into what I was going to say anyway, which is what Justin was talking about earlier, is that we need to be able to quantify what is the things that have happened in the past, and then collect the similar things using data points, and then be able to say, okay, here are the 3 similar cases that we've had that kind of give us a rough estimate as to what this new thing is going to be. It happens that I'm the named inventor in a patent application filed by Thomson Reuters that does a similar thing, and because it's public, I can be able to say what's in the patent application. Is that for any given task, whether it's litigation or transactional work, you could imagine breaking down that matter into 1,000 tasks, and then saying for each of those 1,000 tasks, task 37, I assign it to Jane, who then Jane moves it on her to-do list to done. Now you know how long it takes Jane to do that, and you know that Jane charges $700 an hour. Now you know how much task 37 costs. And then you're able to figure out that task 37 in the aggregate across all the tasks, and be able to better estimate the new thing that comes down, because it needs task 37 and these 20 other tasks. Therefore, I think that the price is going to be X. That is a patent application that thus far has been denied by the US Patent Office. But anyway, that's the idea. So you can then imagine when a lawyer says, well, it depends, like the cost really depends. And really, Sally has been collecting it depends for the last 7 years. That is, we've collected everything that it depends on, and we're making it a Sally tag, so you could be able to quantify those things. And so really, to be able to demonstrate what I mean by that is that there is an area of law that is a thing called patent law that I assume GSK knows a bit about, intellectual property law, and the thing that is patent law. And so then what you could do is to be able to say, okay, how much does a patent deposition cost? And of course, that's at least what the leads, the UTBMS code, essentially as a litigator, I'd often do L330 for depositions. But as a litigator, I say, well, how much does it cost? It depends. Am I taking the deposition, or am I defending the deposition? Or am I merely observing the deposition? Those are 3 different price points. And then is it a fact witness, or is it an expert witness? Or is it a 30B6 corporate witness? Each of those depends on how much it's going to cost. This L330 doesn't reflect any of those things. But if you go to the Sally side, to our deposition practice, those are reflected in all of those things. Am I taking the deposition, or am I defending the deposition? Or am I merely observing the deposition? Is it a fact witness or an expert witness? Or is it a corporate representative? Is it a patent case, or is it a slip and fall case? Once you've tagged all of your matters with those things, now I can get a really better idea as to what is task 37, taking a deposition of an expert witness in a patent infringement case. And then I'm able to better quantify what task 37 is, and what all of the tasks in my matter are. Most importantly, with all of this, is that you could be able to put this unique identifier on patent law. And the idea with the unique identifier is this unique identifier is what's being used by every company on this list. That is, some of the smallest law firms and companies like Thomson Reuters and Lexis, and some of the smallest firms like DLA Piper, Gibson Dunn, NetDocuments, iManage. Everyone on this list is going to be tagging the thing that is patent law with this unique identifier. So then if GSK or a law firm or a corporation wants to be able to query Thomson Reuters and say, hey, give me all of your patent law things, they would send this identifier, and we'd give you all their patent law things. Send that same API query to Docket Alarm or Fastcase or VLEX or to Lexis or to NetDocuments, iManage. Everyone on this list is calling the thing that is patent law this unique identifier. So now everyone's tagging things the same way, so you can quantify in the similar, uniform, standardized way.
And what we've found is that yes, you will also hear it depends, and that these are different, and there's nothing new under the sun, I think. I think that's what we're learning by breaking all this stuff down. The reason why lawyers have always thought that everything was different is because it wasn't enough detail in the data to help explain it. So Sally brings that detail. You have to use it, you have to apply it, but ultimately the matters are very much the same, with maybe some slight, tweaks or a little bit of minor differences. But I really think that this helps shine a light on the truth about legal matters and what they're about.
Yeah, and as far as the data, Jay, I think that's a great point, and Damien, you touched on it too. Like when GSK first moved to the flat fees and off the billable hour, and now let me be clear, Sally's applicable if you're on billable hours, flat fees, whatever, because a law firms, let's face it, internally, GSK can ask for a flat fee. You're still going to be building things, looking at, staffing models, whatever. It's great. But in order to evaluate these things, we had to understand, what does a fair fee look like for taking an expert deposition and things like that. And we decided that we were going to, let's look at all of our historical hourly billing L code data. We realized our L code data was shit for the purposes of actually, I'm sorry, shouldn't have said that. Is not good for the purposes of
Inadequate.
Analyzing data. It was useless. We literally didn't, we gave up. We said, all right, as far as understanding fees for things like, the I would say very usefully granular, if that's a word, detail, as far as it's a depth, it's an expert depth, we're taking it, etc. We started that from scratch, and we started it. I had a spreadsheet with I don't know, 6,000-7,000 rows, literally, manual and all that stuff. And the type of matter was early in my career, non-lawyer, how I decided it should be described. So very efficient. And so Sally, you kind of jump ahead. And when you involve technology, and you tie all these things together. I mean, as far as people are like, if you knew then what you know now, I mean, good Lord, we would have started with Sally. We would have started with it. And this is before Sally was created, but we would have started, because even now to this day, we would be light years ahead of where we are. And it's just, as far as that data being able, because so many of these systems, they collect data. It doesn't matter if you collect data if you can't use the data. It's just, that's very cute. You have a lot of data, but Sally really pushes it really moves the needle as far as all these efforts to collect data. It collects data in the right way so that you can use that data and be informative, not necessarily determinative, but sometimes actually, yes, but at the very least informative, based on history, what things should look like moving forward. So
I like that. And to further put a point on what Justin just said, all the data is there. And you might have said during my previous example of I want to be able to find all the taking of the deposition of an expert deposition in a patent case. You might say, gosh, that's a lot of work to be able to separate the taking versus the defending versus the observing. But it turns out all the data is there. So all the data is in a thing called a timesheet, right? So each of these things here, deposition, contract, affidavit, statement of undisputed facts, is in the timesheet. And so you can imagine that this is all verbatim in Sally. So you don't need a human to do this. This is all programmatically extractable. So Clocktomizer right now is extracting all of these things and applying Sally. Similarly, net documents in this M&A document, directors and officers is verbatim a Sally tag, exchange agent verbatim a Sally tag. So what net documents has said that by the end of this year, net documents will say to the user, hey user, we found these 25 Sally tags. Would you like us to tag these things up for you? And the user can say, yes, please. And then all these are tagged up programmatically, not with your bespoke, unicorn kind of tag system, but with the interoperable Sally tags that now can interoperate with TR and with Lexis and with Docket Alarm and with all of your other clients, et cetera. So this is a way to programmatically be able to interoperate. And that solves an internal problem. That is, how do I extract these data? That is, how do I pull these things out? The answer is that humans should not be tagging these things. That is, the systems should be tagging these things. And so the idea is that, humans should not tag, but they should essentially QA. That is directors and officers. Is that actually a thing that we want to count? And if the answer is yes, you just move on. And so we solve both internal problems, that is internal problems within, Thomson Reuters. Corey, the guy we're working with, his boss said, hey, Corey, we have 30 products that don't talk to each other. Make them talk to each other. And Corey said, oh man, that's going to be really hard because I'm going to have to build a taxonomy ontology and I'm not a lawyer. But then he looked at Sally and said, wow, Sally's actually got a really good ontology. So what Corey's doing is using Sally as a universal translator amongst all 30 of those products to make them all talk to each other. So that's the internal problem he's solving. But then that also serves as an external problem where he can say to all of his law firms that work with TR, he can say, hey, if you want to hit any of those 30 products, send me the Sally codes. And then you're going to be able to connect with all 30 of those products. So that's the external problem he's solving. And that's the same problem we're solving with Intab, that they don't want to have to do onesie-twosie mappings to all the law firms. They want to say, hey, just use Sally and you'll hit all of our things. Same with Litera, same with Agilon, same with Net Documents, iManage. Everybody has the internal problems of systems that don't talk to each other, and then the external problems of interoperability, and Sally really solves both.
And if I can add something, Damien, as far as Jim, I'd be curious if you agree. When we first started this, ages ago, back when we were both young and handsome, one of the hard things talking to people was this is going to take a small army to implement. And I think Damien touched on something very, very important. So that was kind of a barrier for folks. Perceived barrier, but honestly, it probably a relevant thought, very relevant. With the advances in AI and the advances of Sally's ability to do things, I like to use the term auto-magically. It's not a word, I made it up, but I hope it makes sense. The ability now to do things auto-magically, you don't need a small army.
Right.
You can look at this and you train it, and you have folks, as Damien said, that need to do QA. You need to have human touch points. But by and large, this is not some massive transition that is going to take years and years and years and not show benefit for how long. So, Jim, I'd be curious, kind of what you think as far as our efforts to get more people bought on, or not bought on, as far as using the standard.
So the first version was really targeted at what data we're already collecting, right? So we weren't saying, hey, you need to go, have humans mark up all your documents. You're already collecting area of law, you're already collecting jurisdiction. Here's a better way to do it. Let's all use that. But we always said, what we see down the road, we think that there will be tools to help you do this without humans. And I think in the last 3 months, I think it's happened. It's kind of amazing now to think about it. But they've been around. Yes, machine learning's been around for a long time. But what we've seen with GPT, obviously it's just exploded in terms of people's awareness and of what the potential is. But it was really about just getting people to change out their old taxonomy for the one they're doing. The version 2 of the standard, though, was addressing a lot of data that hasn't been tagged yet, kind of things that Damien was showing with Sally. And that's where we know machine learning and AI can help without having all the humans involved.
That's right. And to really build on what both of you said, there's a lot of the work that has been done, say, from 2020 through about 2022 was the work that Intap did. So Intap, what they did is went through a lot of law firms that they work with and say, here's what their websites call areas of law. So they went through Hogan, Jones Day, Cleary, DLA Piper, et cetera. And one of the areas of law that one of the law firms have is appeals to the PTAB. That is not an area of law. The area of law is patent law. The service that I as a lawyer provide is the appellate service because it is appeals to the PTAB. And the PTAB is not an area of law. The PTAB is a forum and venue. So you can imagine if you're that law firm, option one is to have this kind of Frankenstein kind of this area of law, but that really mashes together 3 tags. Wouldn't it be better to be able to say, what are all the patent things that we've done? And then to be able to put 2 tags together, say, what are the patent appeals? Or what are the PTAB alone? Or what are the appeals alone? So by tagging rather than bucketing appeals to the PTAB, a lot of people say, wow, that's a much better way to be able to think about this system that rather than having one bucket, I could do more granular insights. This takes a long time, though, to be able to do this 300 lines took me maybe an afternoon to be able to march through and be able to say, that IT is an information industry, not an area of law, et cetera. But really programmatically with the large language models, that's much easier. Here is an area of law list from a law firm that I'm not going to name because it's frankly embarrassing, where they say that garnishment is an area of law. Garnishment, not an area of law. That is just a remedy. That gas pipeline, not an area of law. Gas pipeline is just a thing that lives in the world. So you can take a garbage area of law list and say to a large language model like GPT, say, here's Sally's area of law set here. Why don't you as GPT assign 4 potential tags to say put them in a table in the order of highest probability to lowest probability, and look what happens. It's able to say, that thing that is garnishment, the area of law that applies to is probably labor and employment law or wage and hour law. Gas pipeline, that relates to energy law or oil and gas law. So this is the QA that Jim, Justin, and I were talking about earlier, that the machine will give you that kind of mapping. And then I, as a user, say, okay, gas pipeline, that's energy law, homeowners implied covenants is real property law, et cetera. So it could be able to do this QA in a way that's much faster than it took me. And it doesn't require my knowledge of all 13,000 things and taking an afternoon. This literally takes seconds. And then I, as a user, just select it and move on. So yeah, so we are now in the machine readable space.
Yeah, no, and I think, as far as I know, I keep going back, Jim, ages ago, but as far as for the folks that are listening in and saying, well, hey, is this whatever? there have been a lot of people way smarter than I am, like Jim, like Damien, that have gone through and done the legwork. And it's almost like serendipitous that we're at a point now where AI, rather than just a buzzword that you hear on webinars, AI is actually starting to really work and make a difference. See, that's a lot of smart people in the background over 7-8 years doing things and developing standards and mapping things. And now you kind of layer on, and not hand over, but you kind of incorporate the AI, the ability to make those suggestions like Damien just showed and things like that. And it's really taken a major leap forward. So I think that's one of the things I hope people appreciate is there's been, Jim, I couldn't tell you how many people have been involved over the years. There have been a lot of people that have worked for a number of years to get it to the point, and then AI has just made that step change, in my opinion.
Well, we needed the initial, Sally brought the initial, sense of the whole thing, right? What does the AI need to work towards? And Damien's better to speak about this than I am, but we help bring some structure to the law so the AI can then apply it, can apply its engine to how we think about what law is. Damien, you want to explain that a little more?
Yeah, absolutely. So people have often, and this, what Jim just said goes to, people are saying, well, with large language models, do we even need Sally? Because the large language models, it's magical. You just ask it a question and it gives you an answer. The problem, though, is large language models hallucinate. That is, if you don't give them a constrained data set to be able to go from. And so that hallucination, you could use Sally to be able to constrain that hallucination to make sure that it does not happen. So I'm going to give a concrete example of what I just described, is that if you say to a large language model, give me for this judge, so this is Judge Susan Richard Nelson, I want to do a motion for summary judgment in front of this judge. Write me a motion that is most likely to win for this judge. If you ask large language model that, good luck with giving a likely to win answer for Susan Richard Nelson. But if you constrain by saying, here are all of Judge Susan Richard Nelson's motions for summary judgment, and by the way, here's a Sally tag for that motion for summary judgment, and I want to find all of the ones that she granted, also a Sally tag. Now I have a limited data set of all 101 cases where Judge Susan Richard Nelson has granted a motion for summary judgment. Now, if you run this language through a large language model saying, here are 101 documents, give me the arguments that are statistically most likely to win for this judge, for this cause of action, for this motion type, you're not going to get hallucinations. You're going to get statistically likely things. So that's the difference, is that you could ask GPT out of the box, give me an answer, and it's going to hallucinate. But if you constrain it with Sally tags, here are 101 things that are Sally tagged, give me the answers. These are now things that that are not going to be hallucinated. So it's not LLMs or Sally, it's LLMs and Sally together are stronger than either one individually.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When it comes to adoption of something like Sally, I mean, often if we look at adoption of other standards elsewhere, it's a case of always trying to find out what's going to come out on top. And do you think that the challenge here is people waiting to see what's going to come out on top? The parallel standards to Sally, or is it just a mindset of let's adopt Sally?
There really is no competing standard. When we started, Justin and I, those early days, one of the benefits of what we're trying to do was that we had no competition, right? There's no one else saying, hey, our areas of law are better than yours, because it was overlooked. It was basically ignored. It was underdeveloped, but it was so necessary. We all knew we needed it, but it was not given the attention deserved. So, we've talked to some other standards that are in the same vein, but really they're not trying to do the same thing, which is to break down with the components of legal matter into great detail.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And so there's an idea of we are counting things that haven't been counting, and they're kind of haven't counted before, largely because it's a really hard job to be able to take all 13,000 things that we have and put them in a holistic sense. That is, some of the things that have been done are just saying for billing purposes, right? For billing purposes, let's count the UTVMS, the things that matter for billing. But that ignores the knowledge management side. So essentially, billing can't talk to the knowledge management. But what Sally is doing is connecting the business of law with the substance of law, being able to count both, because both matter, because the ideas in both interoperate. And when you think about the types of standards, it's also important, and when we think about competition, is that there are three types of standards. One is the metadata, that is, what are the tags that matter? areas of law, services, industries, document types, clause types, and about 12,000 other things. And we're by far the biggest of those. NAS Legal is doing some cool things with being able to say, is this a public thing or a private thing? Is this dealing with, and that's doing it more from a conceptual side of it. We're doing it more from a tactical side. That is, what are the tags that all of these large entities that I just showed a moment ago, what are the tags that they need in their computer science departments to be able to do this? And so the reason that I think we don't really have much competition on the technical side is because NAS Legal is not chasing that technical side. So that's the metadata tags. You also have contents tags. For NDA, what does an NDA look like? You know, Bomb Terms has their content NDA, and really that's not what Sally's doing. We're not saying what is the NDAs have this language or force majeure standard language in this kind of agreement. That's not what we're doing. And then there's of course process standards. How do you do this task? How do you do this? So when we talk about, there are all sorts of standards out there. Which do we choose? I think we should stop saying there are all sorts of standards, because there are three types of standards. There aren't all sorts of metadata standards, right? There's really Sally, NAS Legal, and I just talked to the owners of List, and they said, oh, we're happy if List actually gets absorbed into Sally. So actually now there's List is only two of these metadata standards. So really, what the contents of the documents and the contents of the clauses don't matter nearly as much to us. Then there is a thing called an NDA. There's a thing called a force majeure standard language. Right. And then once you collect that, you actually need the tags to be able to get the content standards, because here's a merger agreement. That's a transactional merger agreement in a bank. Once you collect the force majeure tags and you collect that for all of the matters, then you're able to programmatically say 80% of these have this language for this force majeure clause in a banking M&A agreement. Therefore, that's what's market. Let's stop arguing about angels dancing ahead of pins, because we actually have data to show that 80% of them have this common language. You need the tags first to be able to collect the data, to be able to say what is the most common of those.
And I suppose just to give those listening in a flavour as to what this sort of unlocks. I mean, we've talked about sort of insights, but what do standards sort of open the doors to? What's within the realms of the possible once we sort of put something like this in place?
Yeah, I'd say I'm a board member on a thing called the Legal Value Network, and one of the things that we try to do is connect clients like me, the business side, as far as law firm, the business side people, and third parties, as far as the Intaps and the big hands of the world, and things like that. And we try to connect from a basis of a better understanding, right? For law firms and clients, we're not enemies, we can be friends. And if we're friends, we can actually do better work, have those higher level conversations, and be more valuable to our organizations. What Sally's doing is making those things technologically possible. So rather than just a personal relationship, hey, having a drink at the bar after a conference or whatever is great. For a client, getting to go to a nice dinner from a law firm, outstanding. But how are we actually putting this into practice, those relationships, from as Damien and Jim said, using data, using models, and lifting that up, and via that relationship of trust and things like that, data can help build trust, right? So why is this a fair fee? Why is this a reasonable fee? Well, here's what we did. Here's how we arrived there. It wasn't somebody putting a finger in the air. So as far as, the typical relationships are so important, especially for a guy like me, non-lawyer in a lawyer world, as far as building that trust on a personal level. Sally allows you to build that trust even further on a data-driven, I like to call a decision grade data level. So I think the two of them are just so symbiotic. It makes too much sense.
Data scientists have a good phrase that in God we trust, everybody else brings some data. Right. So the idea, and there's, in the 80s, Reagan said, trust but verify Gorbachev. Right. There's the idea that, of course you trust your law firm, but if that law firm brings data, that's even better. And so
Exactly.
really some of the data that can be brought are Sally data, because we don't only do, if I say something false about Justin, he can sue me for negligent misrepresentation. And
I have done that a couple of times, but Damien and I settled out of court.
That's right. A lot of cease and desist letters, a lot of responses from those cease and desist letters use GPT. So anyway, so there's a thing on the substantive side called negligent misrepresentation. We also have the business of law side. That is for this thing, is this a hourly rate or is this a flat fee? If it's hourly, is there a collar or is it standard rate or is it a discounted rate or a blended rate? These are all business of law things that are really related to the substantive law things on the type of claims that are being done. So this is giving you the data to be able to say, yeah, the last few times we did this hourly, we as a law firm did pretty well, but the client wasn't very happy. So let's do the fixed fee and actually do it in a way that is more helpful for each of us. And let's work for a portfolio, maybe by work type, et cetera.
So Rob, also I was going to add that in terms of innovation, what potentially we can do here is bring these worlds of data together and use cases. So the financial side, what Justin works in, has been starving for detail about the matters beyond what we have. And it's all in the documents, it's all in timesheets and things like that, but it needs to be brought together and GPT can help really bring it out. Our matter descriptions that we have typically do not go into enough granularity to be as powerful as they can be. So I really see that what's going to come out is you're going to see the breaking down of the walls between the data and the products will then build new products that we haven't thought of yet, or really bring the business and practice of law together in a way that has never been seen before in legal tech.
That's right. And I would say that's exactly right, because we shouldn't be arguing about taxonomies. And right now, law firms and clients and vendors are spending so much time spinning cycles saying, okay, let's map my taxonomy to yours. And then if I move from vendor 1 to vendor 2, now I have to remap all those taxonomies. All of that wasted space should be, and time and money should be focusing on innovating and being able to do things, and not be focused on the taxonomies. That's something we really think should be behind us rather than in front of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
One other thing on the programmatic side, one of the impressive contributors to Sally has been Mike Bomarito. Mike Bomarito and Dan Katz. They've done what you see on your screen here, where they went through the U.S. tax code, and they went through the entire U.S. tax code and then used a large language model like GPT to be able to say, hey, GPT, why don't you extract all of the things that matter? So estate, tax credit, amount of the taxed, presidential election campaign fund, et cetera. So what the large language model did is, from a bottom-up standpoint, extracted all of these things from the U.S. tax code. And here's the graph of that. So you can imagine this bottom-up graph connecting with Sally's top-down graph. So I just found a state. So now I'm looking for a state here. There is a state's law. There's a real estate asset, right? There is a state probate, et cetera. So you can imagine connecting our top-down with their bottom-up. So that's the tax code. Imagine this kind of same graph going through your law firm's data, or going through your corporation's data, or going through anything, and be able to say, now I can programmatically find, a thing that is called a tax credit, and be able to then connect it to Sally and be able to find better data this way. So all of this is to say, this is the cool stuff we should be doing, right? We shouldn't be worrying about mapping one company's taxonomy to another company's taxonomy.
All right, now Damien, let me just, because I'm involved with Sally, right? And I've been involved for ages, right? And what you're telling me, as far as Dan Katz is an amazingly brilliant guy, right? But there's probably people on this call, because the last thing you just showed, I was like, wow, that looks so cool. But then sometimes when you see stuff like that, you go, wow, that's impossible for me to implement. So could you maybe take, that's like the, wow, we can get there, or maybe you already can get there, but if you're starting from step 1, right? If you are a law firm, right, that has your own kind of homemade way of, categorizing matters, right? Can you talk about, kind of like what would, and Jim as well, hey, you know what? I'm a law firm. Damien, Jim, I'm in, right? Can you maybe tell about what's the practical next steps to get them started, get you going, and things like, and I know it won't be able to give everything, but where do we go from here? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And so there's almost everybody starts with areas of law. That is, what are the areas of law, like patent law, et cetera. So they start with that. And then once they say, okay, patent law, they then say, okay, is it patent litigation or is it patent prosecution? And so that is where they go to their next step to say, from the area of law, I'm going to say, what service do I provide? Should I get a patent? And then I file a patent with the Patent and Trademark Office. Then I license the patent. Then I litigate the patent. Then I deal with patent assets in bankruptcy. So the service and area of law are the two places where people usually start. And then the third that people usually do is the industry. For what industry are we doing this patent work? Is it a pharmaceuticals matter, et cetera? Or if it's a deal, is it a deal between an information company and an agriculture company, right? So the three usually first steps are areas of law, industry, and service. That will usually get you pretty far. And that's usually the basics of that. If you want to do the actually nuts and bolts of mapping itself, is usually taking the list of things that you have here and then saying, okay, IP litigation, that's area of law is patent law, and then ADR is the service that's being provided. So kind of doing this mapping, it could be as easy as in a spreadsheet, but you can imagine now we actually have a tool that Bommarito created. That's the LMS search tool. We rolled this out in the Legal Week in New York. Earlier, a few weeks ago, where you can actually put IP disputes here, and it runs through the entirety of them, assuming that it does. So it's going to say, okay, IP disputes, what does it look like? What is the area of law? And it'll actually do that mapping to say intellectual property law is the area of law, and the service you provide is litigation in this way. And then it collects IP disputes, area of law is intellectual property, litigation here. I could do the same thing with garnishment. So now the next row is garnishment. I do that. Garnishment. And now it's going to say the area of law seems like employment law. As I select that, and then there's a thing under objectives called garnishment. I select that too. I can now take all the things I do. I could do 10, 100 of these, and I could download this as a CSV, an Excel spreadsheet. And now I'm exported, and you could be able to then import that into your systems and be able to connect it. So really, it's as easy as doing this, but just much more programmatically.
Typically what organizations do is they identify where's the prime source of this basic data in our organization, what software, what program. They look at the taxonomy and they figure out, do we want to use Sally whole, not whole in terms of every node, but the ones that matter or they need, or do you want to do a back end? The beauty of Sally, and this is something that we should pat ourselves on the back for, Justin, is you can map it to anything. So you can do in the back end, the front end. And there's no rule about how you implement it because the flexibility allows you to do it whatever suits your organization. Some organizations don't have the appetite to just do a lift and replace. Some do. Some are more stealth about it and saying in the back end we're going to do better coding using Sally, but in the front end because our lawyers like these terms, we'll use our old one. So anyway, the short answer is it's really a taxonomy implementation. It's not a technology implementation. That's what Sally is.
That's right. And to further Jim's point, you could imagine the tech people want these tags so they can run show me all the patent things or show me all the appellate things or show me all the patent appeals to be able to slice and dice the data however they want. But the senior partner says, no, you're going to take away my appeals to the PTAB from my cold, dead hands, right? So really, you could say you could have the best of both worlds. You give that partner that button that says appeals to the PTAB, but then in the back end, you tag it up with these tags so that you can have the best of both worlds. So I can get my good data and that partner can get their good thing right here. And to further what Jim was just saying is that usually when people start out, they do the mapping from what they have internally to what Sally has. Usually what happens next is people realize, oh, wait, Sally's really good. And then they start incorporating things from Sally into their ontology. And then they start doing so many of that. Then they say, well, gosh, maybe actually I start with Sally as my foundation rather than my initial one as my foundation. So we've seen this, dozens of times where people start with their own taxonomy, thinking it's, who's better than my law firm or who's better than my corporation, when they soon realize, wow, Sally's actually more comprehensive and has better data. So then they flip over to use Sally as a foundation. And then to the extent that we're missing anything, they say, hey, Sally, you should add these few things. And then Jim and I add those if they make sense. So this is usually what the implementation is.
We did this for Clifford Chance. we helped them. We helped you guys do your mapping with some of your colleagues of your taxonomy.
Yeah, and actually, I'm glad, Damien and Jim, I'm glad you guys really described that because, sometimes it can be daunting. Like even if you see the nirvana, if you
Absolutely.
will, what could be, sometimes it can be daunting as far as how we take a first step. And I think
Definitely.
that's something that's really important to know about Sally and the codes is that you can do this in iterations, right?
Yes.
It can be baby steps. It can be feel it out. It can be, hey, you know what? We're going to do this. Then we're going to be able to get some quick wins. Then we're going to be able to show the partnership, whatever, the legal department, some quick wins. And then after that, you get rolling, and now you can use buzzwords like Chat GPT and get everybody super stoked about it, right? So I think that's very important. Is that this is not an overhaul of all your systems, complete upheaval of, as you said, pulling things from people's cold dead hands. This can be a process. Folks like Jim, especially Damien, can kind of give you based on your situation, right? You know what? We had a client. It's kind of like Sally. You know what? We had a client, 3 clients over the last 2 years that were similarly situated, and here's how they implemented. You know what I mean? So I think that's something important for folks to understand.
I agree with that. And, we at Sally like to think of ourselves as peacemakers. So we solve problems within organizations. One of the problems that a lot of people on this call probably have is that marketing argues as to what the areas of law versus what the knowledge management people say, versus what the pricing people say, versus what all of these stakeholders all would argue as to this is the things we should be counting. So Sally's helps settle those arguments to say, hey, maybe we should stop arguing amongst ourselves because there's a thing out there called Sally, and every vendor that we work with is adopting Sally. So stop arguing amongst ourselves amongst whether the area of law should be called, whether it should be tagged with the thing that is appeals to the PTAB, right? Let's use Sally because that way we're not going to have to spend all this time interoperating. We're going to go out of the box. So we settle that internal argument to be able to say, hey, by the way, it's actually pretty good. So stop arguing amongst yourselves.
Actually, you know what? I think it's a great point, Damien. But one of the things that I tell our firms is that when you're approaching GSK or any other client now, I mean, approach them as an enterprise, like be united, right? And that goes from everything from, don't have one practice area approach GSK as bargain basement prices, and another one say we are a premium law firm, right? But this also, as far as alignment on the business side, where the business side is being more and more involved in talking with the business side of clients and approach things in a uniform manner where you're treating, it's more similar to a company to company relationship, right? Sorry, lawyers, you are a business. Your law firm is a business. Everything isn't pro bono, right? So how are you approaching a client as marketing, as, pricing, whatever? And this, again, kind of getting rid of those arguments is going to streamline the process of approaching a client in a meeting with a relationship partner and that general counsel, right? Kind of a state of the union meeting that happens every 6 months or every year. What are your messages? What areas are you trying to push or let that GC know about and things like that? And then if you get a shot, when the rubber meets the road, how are you proving your worth outside of providing excellent representation? That's table stakes. For clients like GSK, that's table stakes, right? It's not, but also how easy are you to do business with? It's so hard to differentiate, I think, for firms in such a lateral market. So how do you differentiate? Being easy and effective and having that trust in doing business is a differentiator, especially for large clients.
Slightly conscious of time, chaps. So I suppose we've got a few minutes left. So any final thoughts on this before we sort of start bringing this to a close, Damien?
Yeah, I really enjoyed this conversation, and I would really encourage, what I said earlier is that we settle internal problems and we settle external problems. Internal problems, we use 12 different systems. They all use different names. Let's just consolidate that internal work. And all of our clients and all of our law firms and all of our other external organizations, they all use this different things. So wouldn't it be great if we just combine all of our efforts to stop spinning our wheels? I think that's the primary ways that let's solve the internal problems, let's solve the external problems, and maybe communicate them together. And another way that you could solve those internal problems, Justin made me think of this, is that I, as a lawyer, want to be able to see how many times have we as a law firm won this type of motion in front of this type of judge for this type of cause of action. Each of those is a Sally tag. That's helpful for me as a lawyer. Also helpful for business development that wants to pitch Justin to say, look how successful we are on this type of motion before this judge for this cause of action. So internally, wouldn't it be great if both of them were using that same ontology? To be able to say, yes, we at the business development side can be able to use the same things that the substantive knowledge side are. So anyways, that's all of these cool things that we should be building. We shouldn't be tied down to taxonomies to be able to prevent us from building these cool things. We should be using the standard to be able to help both sides.
Yeah.
Justin?
Yeah, sure. I mean, as far as what Damien just said, again, you know, I can talk from the client side as far as differentiators. A pitch like that is I wish it was more common. I'll put it that way. I mean, and as far as data, I mean, I'm a geek about this stuff, right? But I'll tell you what, as far as higher ups, as far as finance, as far as even lawyers, heads of litigation, et cetera, are becoming geekier about data and getting decision grade data to make decisions, right? Because I mean, ultimately, everybody's got a boss unless you're the CEO. And then for GSK, her boss is the board, right? So why did you hire Hannigan and Riehl, right? Well, hey, look, here's why. Because they, as Damien was saying, here's how we saw the right angle for this matter, the right approach, and they showed us how successful they've been in similar matters. So if at the very least, being able to pitch better using decision grade data, again, that would be a huge differentiator.
So one thing we didn't talk about, and I want to make sure is clear, the word global is a part of the organization's name. Sally is universal. It's not US only or built on US law. So I want to make that, I don't think we talked about that. That's an important point. Damien and I we had a taxonomy from someone who was in Germany or somewhere in continental Europe, and they shared it with us, and it mapped to Sally like 95%. It's amazing how comparable this stuff is. There's not a whole lot of jurisdictional difference. So I want to make that point. Number two is that I know the machines are taking over, but Sally is still run by people. So feel free to reach out to us if you have anything you want to talk about. We're glad to help. We have meetings almost every day with people that are interested and help them thinking through the things we talked about with Justin about implementation. And we have a lot of experience in that. We're glad to share it with you and guide you.
That's right. And to build on what Jim said, a funny anecdote is that one of the companies that we worked with was a UK company that was going through our asset types and specifically our real estate assets. And they said, hey, everything that you have in these real estate asset list is spot on. One thing you're missing is pubs. That is the public houses within the UK. And so we said, cool, we're going to say for the country, that is the UK, we're going to add pubs. So now it's hotels and public houses. We had no problem adding pubs. That's right. That's exactly right. So this is an example of this kind of contributing to be able to say, hey, you're just missing a thing. So we added pubs to be able to say that that's a thing now is within Sally.
And real quick, the tool here that you're seeing helps us map it all together. This is a graphical database. So all these things can be, Justin, I remember way back when we had trouble making clear how things interrelated. This tool lets you do that. Back in the days of spreadsheets, couldn't do it, but now you can do it here.
Imagine how you'd see this on a spreadsheet, where a maritime negligence is a type of negligence claim that is also an admiralty claim argued in admiralty court, which is part of the area of law that is admiralty and maritime law, that is part of the industry that is the transportation logistics industry. Impossible to show on a spreadsheet, but beautiful to show in this tool.
Yeah.
And all of these things are programmatically done, so your IT systems can say, oh, it's easy to implement.
And although you,
I think. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
But no, yeah, I think since we have a minute or so, I won't speak for Damien and Jim both, but I think they both said it themselves. I mean, we enjoy this stuff. I mean, honestly, like we think, especially for me, and Damien and I are fortunately getting to know each other better over the last year or so. But Jim and I, we've been talking about this for ages. and seeing where it is now from where it started is insane. So, I mean, please don't hesitate. Reach out to me on LinkedIn if you'd like to talk, get the conversation started. I mean, you know, Jim and Damien, if you couldn't tell, much smarter than I am. I'm happy to loop you in with them. But please, if you would like, don't hesitate to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Always love to learn stuff from folks. So,
yep.
Thanks, guys. Well,
Likewise.
Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today. And hopefully for those of you tuning in, it's been quite an insightful discussion and great to hear about Sally and how that's sort of really helping to push the open innovation agenda in law. You know, obviously, this, as everyone's already mentioned, this conversation doesn't end here. You know, go back to your firms and share these ideas and thoughts and start striking up some conversations internally. And I'd like to thank the Global Legaltech Hub, who've really sort of put this event together and made this possible. Thank the incredible trio of panelists that we've got here for all of your time and your expertise, and for sharing your perspectives and experiences. It's been really invaluable and really quite insightful for my part. And thankfully, I'd just like to thank the audience for joining us, tuning in, and being part of this event. We hope to see you at some future events as well. Thanks very much, everyone.
Cheers. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.